Hello and welcome to podcast 33 from Football-Oranje, your home of Dutch football. I'm Michael Statham and I'm with Football-Oranje editor Michael Bell and writer James Rowe this evening to talk about all of the summer transfer dealings of the Eredivisie clubs and Dutch clubs' fortunes in European competition this week. You're listening to us on YouTube, SoundCloud or iTunes. Don't forget to support football.oranje.com with a like and a subscribe wherever you're listening. Before we start, I must tell listeners that even though we received so many great questions this week on Twitter for this podcast, we cannot answer all of them. Those that we didn't answer will be answered on our next podcast in only a week's time when we'll be previewing the new Eredivisie season. Enjoy! I think let's start with Ajax's win against Sturm Graz. They won 2-0, it was a Champions League qualifier. First of 3 rounds before they can reach the group stages of either the Champions League or the Europa League. And it was the first, official match of the 2018-19 season involving Dutch teams. What did both of you make of the match? I know, James, you went to go and see the match in the stadium, right?
Yeah, I went to watch the match live, and I thought it was a decent win. They've done well not to concede an away goal. I thought Elijah Schöne was very lucky with his penalty because it was a really poor penalty. And he managed to follow up with the rebound, which gives them a little bit of breathing space. The crowd really got behind the official debuts of Dusan Tadic and Daley Blind, and they were really raucous and passionate, especially when they both came on. And also Carl Eiting and Kai Sierhuis also came into the fold later on in the game. So be interesting to see how they approach the second leg. But the first thing that struck me, having watched them for the first time this season in such a game, is having attended the European matches from years gone by against Nice and Rosenborg and many others through the years. They appear to have learnt their lesson that they've got to take their chances at this level. Otherwise, they don't have any chance of making the group stages of the Europa League or even the Champions League. And you could tell that Huntelaar had chances and he was a little bit too eager. But he got himself in some good positions. I think he just tried a bit too hard at certain times. But they can be very happy with their 2-0 lead, and it should be enough to finish the tie off in Austria, and that will lead them to a 2-legged tie against Belgian side Standard Liège.
Thinking if you looked at Ajax and the way they played, you have to say their strength was midfield. I think Hakim Ziyech was unplayable in the first half. He was excellent. He was behind everything that they did well, and Mazraoui on the right hand side. They had a nice little connection on the wing, which Sturm Graz just couldn't deal with. But I think if you're Erik ten Hag, you'd be worried that one, they did have a lot of chances and they only scored twice. I think they should have won this game 3 or 4-0. But at the start of the game, they were also very shaky at the back, and probably one of the reasons for that is Frenkie de Jong still playing in the centre defence. Obviously Daley Blind maybe not fit enough to start, but I think going forward he needs to move Frenkie de Jong back into midfield where he's strongest and have a natural defender there, because on his European nights, one away goal could have been an absolute disaster, and there's a few chances that Sturm Graz had on the counter that could have opened them up, because Frenkie de Jong just roams forward at will, and it sometimes leaves him a bit short. But I think overall the performance was excellent from the midfield. Tadic came on and he looked very lively. The only worry is Huntelaar up front. He had several chances to score and fluffed all of them. And this sort of stems from last season as well. I don't think anyone watching Ajax would have said that Huntelaar had a great season, and Dolberg was, he was injury prone last season. When he was fit, he lacked a bit of confidence in front of goal. Most of his goals were penalties. My only worry for Ajax going into the new season is who scores the goals, really.
Yeah, you say that about Huntelaar. He's out of form, and Kasper Dolberg, his replacement, they're both vying for the striker's role. He's not really in the best of form, is he? He hasn't been for a little while, actually. The whole of last season, he was struggling with injuries, and now it's his time to come back. He hasn't really been the same. Why do you think that is?
I think what plays a part as well is not just his injury last season, but on the final day of the summer transfer window, Monaco rejected a 49 million bid from Monaco for Dolberg, and they rejected it because they had no time to find a replacement, and it's understandable. But I think for Dolberg as well, you know, when such a club as Monaco comes in for you and you can't go, that I think mentally that does something to you, where you think, you know, although he's done very well at Ajax and he was a tremendous signing from Silkeborg, that maybe he's thinking in his head that if he'd have had the opportunity to go to Monaco and to go to a better league in the French league and play his trade, that I think that might have affected him a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was totally just a confidence thing with Dolberg. His link-up play and his technical ability is, without question, he's an excellent prospect. It's just, I think there's something on his mind last season. He comes into this season probably with something to prove, and hopefully we'll see the best of him this year.
Apart from that, though, the strikers, I guess, we're picking at weaknesses here, but around these players are several talented midfielders, and the defenders as well. How are Ajax keeping hold of De Ligt, Frenkie de Jong, many players, and they've added Tadic, Daley Blind? Can they afford this, or do you think players are going to leave?
I personally think that maybe there hasn't been as much interest as Ajax maybe thought there would be. I know Barcelona have followed De Jong, and I don't think they're going to give up. I think they're waiting to see if Ajax exit the Champions League. I think Hakim Ziyech, he will go eventually. I think his performance against Graz will only, heighten interest in him. De Ligt is an interesting one. I thought as soon as they signed Daley Blind that he was going to go. I think a lot of Ajax excitement around the signings of Tadic and Blind, they seem to think that Mark Overmars has now opened the purse strings, and they're all saying, "Oh, now we're changing tact and we're going to spend all this money." But if Bayern Munich or whoever come in for De Ligt, they're going to pay 50 million. If whoever comes in for Ziyech is going to pay 30 million, it's going to engulf whatever they've paid for those two players, and they're going to make a huge profit this summer. And I think, there's still a month to go to the transfer window. There's still a long time, and I think Ziyech will definitely go away. If they exit the Champions League, De Jong will go, and I think there's still a big question mark over De Ligt.
I think it's telling that the transfer window closes earlier this year than previous years, and I still think that that business will be done right at the very end. I think Mike makes a very good point about the potential European exploits of Ajax and the ramifications that might have. But I'd like to advocate in the case of De Ligt that he chooses the right club, because it's very important. I watched him again on on Tuesday night, and even though it's European football and playing against one of the biggest teams in Austria, okay, not the highest level, but his composure on the ball and his movement, and just to be so calm without the ball and also with the ball is very impressive. And I hope that if he does leave, that he goes to a club a la Bayern Munich, for example, that will look after him, where he'll be able to ease himself in, because it would be an absolute crying shame if such a player was to only feature coming on as sub or playing in Champions League dead rubbers or even domestic cup games. I think that would stunt his growth, and I don't think that would do him any favours at all. Okay,
if these players can stay then, and Ajax can play Blind and Tadic loads, get loads of games, then they've got a really quality side. Cam asked a question on Twitter: is the reason for Overmars getting Blind and Tadic because there is so much pressure to win the league this year?
Partly. I think the other part to that question is the Overmars stating in previous weeks that he wants Ajax to become the Bayern Munich of the Netherlands in terms of dominance. So I think those signings play a part in that. But I think it was necessary as well. They haven't won a trophy for 4 years and really need to start winning again. And the upheaval of last season with a change of manager around Christmas time, they need some stability and they need to win something this season. And I think they realise that at board level, and I think they will win something this season. I'm no doubt we'll talk about it as maybe in this pod and in the preview pods for the coming weeks. But I think with how they've brought and how they've gone about their business, I think if they manage to keep things reasonably together, they must be favourites to win the Eredivisie this season, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Ajax have seen Feyenoord win it. They've seen PSV the past couple of years win it. I think And they've tried the past couple of years to go with youngsters, and they brought Hunter back last year on a free, and it hasn't really worked. I think the fans have been calling for years for Overmars to spend some money. It's a rich club that has plenty of money to sell players for millions. They have the means to actually go out and spend money. It's about time that they start doing it. And if they want to be the Bayern Munich of the Netherlands, it's going to cost them. And it's good to see that a Dutch club with the coefficient so bad and Dutch football so maligned, going out and buying Premier League players in the prime of their careers. It's something that we've seen for years. It's usually the other way. Clubs go to the Premier League when they're in their prime, then come back when they're older. But Dusan Tadic and Blind, 27, 28, they should be coming to Ajax now with their best years ahead of them, which is good to see.
It's funny you say that. I watched an interview with Matthijs de Ligt, and he said, and he was almost surprised at how Blind came back so early in his career. And it's things like that that might send signals to him that actually staying at Ajax isn't such a bad thing to do. It's going to be the right place for him to develop, at least for another year. And if they can use the players around him to get to the Champions League, then that may well persuade him to stay. And that brings me on to my question from Abdul, who asked, do you think that Ajax and PSV can qualify together to the Champions League? It hasn't happened in a while, and I guess my answer to that would be that it depends solely on the draw.
Yeah, I agree, and also where the second leg is, because if you look at the potential opponents in the final playoff round, you've got Benfica, Fenerbahce. It's going to entirely depend on the draw. Looking back at the Champions League last year, when I was at the game against Nice, they were fully in control against Nice, winning 2-1, trying to see the game out, and then all of a sudden the equaliser came from Nice to make it 2-2, and Ajax went out on away goals. So the small margins at this level, but obviously it fully depends on the draw. But if I had to give an answer to Abdul's question, I think that one of the two will make it, and the other one will play in the Europa League. If that's my premature opinion, but that's what I'm going to go with.
I agree with that. I think one will definitely make it, but I hope it's probably the best chance for years that we might have two Dutch clubs in the Champions League group stages. I think Standard Liège and Sturm Graz aren't, with all due respect to those two clubs, the hardest draw that Ajax could have got, and it's a fantastic chance with the players that they've got to reach the playoff, and then it's two legs, then they could be in the group stages. I think PSV will get a kinder draw because they're champions. They might get an easier playoff. It'd be amazing for Dutch football if two clubs could make it, and so important for the future.
Question from Eamon. Due to the plight of Dutch football, with Ajax signing Tadic and Blint, Feyenoord signing Clasie on loan, PSV retaining Bergwijn and Lozano, is there a sense of urgency for Dutch clubs to do well in Europe to improve the standard of football?
I would say so, but I think it's more that they want to get their own house in order and they want to get stronger domestically. I don't think they're necessarily thinking about the coefficient of Dutch football. I think all respective clubs are focusing on what they have to do. For example, Ajax going out and signing the players they've signed, PSV taking a punt on appointing Van Bommel, with hardly any experience apart from an assistant, and PSV going about their way with their approach, how they want to do things, and how they keep everything as one within the club. And I think with Feyenoord as well, I think Clasie is a good loan signing for them, and I think Van Persie will play a role this season in bringing the youngsters on. I saw that the striker Dylan Vente stated that he wants at least 10. He wants to take part in at least 10 matches, and he has an objective of scoring 7 goals. So I think has a point, but I think personally that the clubs are focusing more on themselves and what they have to do, and not necessarily about the necessities that the Dutch clubs have at European level.
Yeah, I agree with you, James. Purely because I think the signings that teams are making are more of a reaction to winning the title again. Ajax are very keen to go and do that. final bringing Classy back. To be fair, Classy wasn't getting a lot of games where he is at Southampton, so coming back to final is maybe the right choice. PSV getting to keep their best players is a fantastic move, and I think we'll definitely see Lozano in a PSV shirt for one more season. But you say about Mark Van Bommel, well, what do you think, James? What do you think about his chances? Because I know that we both sit on opposite side of the fence about how we think he'll do this season.
I don't think he's going to do as well as what everybody hopes. Was a tremendous player, and everywhere he went he had success, and that's wonderful, and there can be no doubt in the footballing talent that the man had. But for this to be your very first job as a full professional manager in football, I think is a big ask, and I can understand that PSV took the similar route with Cocu many years ago, but I can't see Van Bommel making a huge mark. Over time, I think he will. I think over time at PSV, if he stays there for 3 or 4 seasons, he will eventually become a success. But I don't think in his debut season that he'll be pulling up any trees in terms of PSV winning the title. But we shall just have to wait and see.
I see your opinion, James. But I think it's cautious to say that he won't succeed at PSV. I think that it does help that he has the players at his disposal that he does. But what does interest me, and I know they're only friendlies, but the friendly results of PSV have been very promising. They're scoring a lot of goals. And I think that will really help them in the games where Cocu struggled last season. And that was teams at home where he really struggled to break them down, break their defence down. And even though PSV did win the title by a comfortable margin, I think the way that Van Bommel's got his attacking players set up, I do think that it will help break teams down a lot quicker, and we'll see a lot more convincing results this season.
Interesting.
Yeah, Van Bommel's, since he's come in, he's stated that he wants to play a more attacking, fluid style of football, and he's worked a lot on the players' fitness. I've seen a lot of articles about how he's changing things on the training ground. He's a lot more rigorous with the fitness, and I think throughout the season, I think we'll see that have benefits on PSV. I think they've done well on the transfer market. I think they're going to lose Arias, but Denzel Dumfries is an amazing replacement for them. Just the amount of assists that he gets, even in pre-season already, he's started getting them. He's got 2 or 3 already. Angelino, he was excellent at NAC last season, and from dead ball situations, he's excellent. He scores free kicks. He's an excellent corner taker, and with somebody like De Jong in the box, that's going to guarantee goals. I think PSV go into the season with so many weapons. If they can add another attacking midfielder to replace Van Ginkel, they're for me favourites to win the title. I don't really mind it. It's Van Bommel's first season. I think all around the group knows each other, they know how to play. They've got so many exciting young talents coming through. I think they're going into the season looking very good.
So some really good opinions from you guys about Ajax and PSV, and just to let listeners know, we will be talking a lot more about Feyenoord next time. But our main topic for the podcast today is about Dutch clubs in Europe and some transfers. So let's come back to the results in Europe. RZ lost to Kazakhstan side Kairat, and they lost 2-0. And Vitesse drew 2-2 with Romanian side Vitrolul. What do you guys think about those matches? And was it a surprise about those results or not?
The RZ one was a particular nasty surprise, because they've given themselves a mountain to climb, and to get knocked out of Europe at the first hurdle for a club who's invested so heavily in youth and done so well in recent years would be a big shock. Fair play to Vitesse. I didn't think that they would find their way back into the game, but they managed to pick up 2 priceless away goals, which you would hope with home advantage will see them through. But it's still going to be tough, and I've been saying for years, not just on this podcast, but on other podcasts, as a fan of European football in general, the gap between the seasoned and bigger European clubs and the smaller clubs is getting smaller and smaller and smaller every year, and this is so apparent it's untrue. And you see in the case of Kairat, who have Andrea Sharvinis as in their team, they played at home to RZ and they won they won 2-0 and they've given themselves a fantastic chance to make progress in Europe. And I would fear for AZ a little bit if they was to go out at the first hurdle against Kayalat, because I fear that may well set the tone for the start of the season, and it would be difficult for the players to accept and the manager as well. So it'd be interesting to see what happens.
I watched the whole of the AZ game, and to describe their performance as horrific as being pleasant. It was shockingly bad. The goals that they conceded were schoolboy errors. I think if you're looking at Ron Vlaar as being a starting centre back for AZ in the coming season, they're not going to finish in the top 3 again. He slipped up for the first goal. The striker slipped up as well, but Vlaar couldn't get up in time. Then he just had a free run and goal. The second one, the boy was left totally unmarked to the back post. It was so easy. Going forward, I couldn't count a single chance in the second half when he thought maybe the second half to go for it, to throw all caution to the wind, or too busy playing back passes for their defence, and it could easily have been 3 or 4-0 to Kairat, who looked deadly on the counter. I think you got to blame their stagnation in the transfer market for this, because Veghorst has been gone for a while, and they got 10 million for him, and they haven't signed a replacement until today. Going into the game, Fred Friday, yes, he had a few good games in pre-season, but if you watch his performance yesterday, he's not cut out for a European level. He was so bad. He couldn't control the ball, let alone pass to a teammate. It was shocking. If they had Bjorn Johnson up front, he might not be the greatest, but he had 19 goals for Ado last season. He's a target man. He's a threat in the box. He would have been much better. Johan Bakash, he's gone now, but he brought in 25 million plus, and they were haggling with Ado Den Haag over a 2 million fee when they've made 35 million this summer. It's not good enough, and they should have had these signings wrapped up before the game, and they paid the price for it. Yes, in the home leg, their dominance means that they could probably win 3-4-0, but if they go out, I think they've only got themselves to blame. I think they underestimated Kairat, who are no mugs, second in the Kazakhstan league last year and the cup winners. And I think, as James says, the level of these nations are getting higher and higher, and you can't take them for granted anymore.
Yeah, some fair comments there. But why are RZ taking their team for granted, in that they've got the main base of what they had from last season, but they've lost their best players, Veghorst and Johan Bach. I personally, Michael, I'm not convinced by Bjorn Johnson, the new striker from Ado Den Haag. Unless he's going to be a late bloomer in his career, he's 26, but has only just hit this level in his career. And they're going to be replacing Johan Bach with Calvin Stengs, who's still recovering from his long-term injury, still trying to regain fitness. Is this team really good enough to compete in Europe and finish in the top 3 for the Eredivisie again?
I don't think so, no. I can't see them turning the second leg around, because I think Kairat will score. And I think it's going to, hopefully not, but I feel that it's going to set the tone for the new season. I think they've done a very noble thing to invest so well in the youth policy with a new training complex and really reap the rewards, that I think identifying talent on the transfer market, maybe their eye has been taken off of that slightly. If you compare that to PSV with Dumfries, that's a tremendous signing, a fantastic signing, and it just proves that in the case of Dumfries, starting out at Sparta, having a wonderful season, making the step to Heelan Vane, getting stronger, getting better, and now playing for PSV, it just goes to show that if you look hard enough, there are players to be found that still come through the traditional route. For example, Football-Oranje listeners and readers will know how highly I rate Vitesse midfielder Brian Linson. I've rated him since his favourite demo days, and a player like that, for example, who's been important when he was at Heracles, was important for Groningen. It was very important for Vitesse last season. You would think that AZ would be proactive to look at players like that and think, well, with his goals and assists, he could do us the world of good. We're going for him. But I think they've just been so focused on their youth policy that they maybe taking their eye off potential targets in the domestic league, perhaps.
Well, Calvin Stengs is an exceptional talent, and when he comes back, you're only judging this off of 4 or 5 games, but those 4 or 5 games that we saw him in were exceptional. Before he got injured against PSV, he tore that defence apart constantly. I know it was only 5 or 6 minutes, but he looked like he was going to lead AZ to victory. And at the back end of last season, he was sensational, and he's one of the big hopes for Dutch football, along with Myron Boadu, the 17-year-old who started on the left wing yesterday. So them two with Idrissi means that their wings are fine. The only thing I say about Janssen signing, he is a late bloomer, but if you had said to me Weghorst, when he was playing at Heracles, was going to go to AZ, have 2 great seasons, then play for Wolfsburg and be a Dutch international, I would have laughed, because I would have been like, no, he's not good enough. But there's something about the training at AZ that improved him as a player, and he was excellent last season. I think they could do the same with Janssen, and if he links up well with the wingers, then he could be another success. He is a late bloomer, but sometimes that happens, and I think he'll score a lot of goals for AZ this season.
You know, you've got me there with that comment about Weghorst, because I was definitely in the same opinion. Weghorst wasn't good enough, was he, when he first signed for AZ a couple of years ago? But wow, the development he's had has just been amazing. But I guess it does help with all those players that you've got around you. AZ are so good at the way they build the play, and if they get the right striker that fits into the system, then perfect. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to again insist that listeners, if you are looking for the Eredivisie preview podcast, we are releasing one next week. But if we're still going to focus on the transfer market side of things, a question from Alex is, what have been the best acquisitions, player or manager, for smaller Eredivisie sides this summer that could see them overachieve next season?
Player-wise, I think Heerenveen, getting Sam Lammers from PSV. I think he'll score double figures this season. I think he's a very talented striker. You can't get ahead of Luc de Jong right at the moment. PSV have done well to set him at Heerenveen. He's going to start the whole season. I think he'll score. I hope 20 goals, because I want to see him in the Dutch national team in the future, but we'll see. But I think the big winners in the Eredivisie outside the top 5 this summer have been Pek Zwolle. Signing Clint Leemans and Vito van Crooij from VVV Venlo. That's 2 excellent players. They both had great seasons last year. Pek Zwolle didn't have that great a year, so I think these 2 will elevate them higher. I think they'll go back into challenging for Europe. I know they released plans earlier this summer saying that they want to be a top 8 club every year. They want to be in Europe every second year. They want to be, challenging for that 5th spot outside the PSVs, the Ajax's, Feyenoords and AZs. They want to be the next big one, and they're looking at selling shares to raise all this funds for money at Pek Zwolle. I think these 2 signings, along with all the youngsters there, Seth van den Berg, there's a lot of good talent there. I think Groningen have done very well as well. They raised the funds to get Ritsu Doan on a permanent deal, the Japanese midfielder who had an excellent season last year, and getting Matteo Cassiera from Ajax on loan. I think he has a big point to prove to Ajax. He was top goal scorer for young Ajax last year in the Eredivisie. Hasn't really shown it in the Eredivisie so far, and I think this is a big season for him.
Yeah, good analysis there of the Eredivisie sides that have been very active in the transfer market this summer. If we look further afield now at some of the Dutch players abroad, I guess the biggest story has been Davy Klaassen leaving Everton for German side Werder Bremen. What are his chances there? Do you think he'll finally get that move abroad right? Do you think he'll finally get the games that he deserves?
Yes, and I think it can't come soon enough for him, because I think he'll be chomping at the bit to get back to playing, because it was such a shame that things went for him for the way they did, especially under the tutelage of Allardyce. So I think Allardyce completely ignored him, and obviously Klaassen has got qualities that Allardyce was never really interested in, or could not really understand in terms of how to play that player, in terms of getting the best for your team. And I think it's a good league, the Bundesliga. I think Klaassen will slowly find his feet, and I think he'd be wise to stay there as long as he can, because Werder Bremen is also a it's also a good club. You know, it played European football not so long ago. Won a Bundesliga title. I think it was a decade ago now, perhaps. And they do have pedigree. So I think his nightmare is finally over, and he can look forward to playing for a seasoned German club and slowly finding his feet again. And I think it's a very good move for him.
I agree. I think it's an excellent move for him. I'd like to see more Dutch players. I know Germany's a popular destination for them, but it seems that the Premier League has been an attraction for Dutch players in the past few years. Too many have gone there to go at clubs that are maybe lower down the table. You look at, say, for instance, Luciano Narsing, who, a title winner at PSV, decides to go to Swansea City because they're in the Premier League, and now he's a Championship player. I think a lot more players need to look at going to the Bundesliga, the Serie A, and La Liga. I think La Liga used to be a hotspot for Dutch talent, but there's none now. There's Sillissen on the bench at Barcelona, but that league used to be full of Dutch players, but not anymore. I'd like to see a lot more decide against the Premier League and go around Europe, because I think the style of play suits them better in different leagues than the Premier League. You've seen a lot of them fail in England over the past few years, and I think a smarter decision transfer-wise for the next few years will help the Dutch national team definitely.
It's interesting how Klaassen joins former Eredivisie players Milo Rashica, Niklas Moisander, and Adam Johansson at Werder Bremen. Maybe the club's got an eye on some of these players in the Dutch league, which may well help his style. Klaassen did say that he joined the club and was excited to play attractive attacking football, to quote him exactly. So maybe he's in the right place now. Yeah,
he won't get that under Sam Allardyce at Everton anyway.
Oh no, definitely not. Next one, I guess. James, you want to talk about Eredivisie?
Yes, I would like to. I took a city break to Belgrade this week, and I went to watch Red Star Belgrade against FK Suduva from Lithuania. Red Star Belgrade won 3-0, and it's a real raucous atmosphere, so lovers of football away days, if you get yourself to Belgrade, you'll have a great time. But Lorenzo Basilio, who recently signed for Red Star, took that game by the scruff of the neck, scored an absolutely wonderful opening goal. And it was really evident to me how he started as he's meant to go on in terms of signing for a very, very big club with a lot of history. And I think he'll have a very good season at Red Star. I think they'll qualify for Europe, whether that be Champions League or even Europa League. I think we'll see more of him. But he had I think he was previously with Apoel Nicosia in Cyprus, and I think it's a very good move, and he had a fantastic game. And I heard the name Basilio, and I thought, I recognise that name, and then I did a bit more research when I come back to my hotel and realised it was him, and it was a tremendous opening goal. If people can look it up on YouTube, Red Star Belgrade against Suduva, you'll see a fantastic opening goal.
Cool. Speaking of former Ajax wingers, another player that's been on the move this summer, Javola Dilrosun. The youngster played for Ajax when he was a teenager, moved to Man City, and it hasn't gone that well for him. He hasn't got the games he wanted, and he's left on a free transfer to Hertha Berlin in the Bundesliga. So another player from the Netherlands that's headed off to Germany. And what do you think about his chances? I know if you visit our YouTube channel, we've got a video out at the moment about the top 10 wonder kids you could watch this season. And Dilrosun is in there for a good reason, because he does have potential. Michael, you watched him a lot when he was a teenager, didn't you?
Yeah, he's been a part of the Dutch national team youth squads for years. But again, he was tempted to England, far too young. If you look at the same with Rodney Congolo, he went to Manchester City around the same sort of time. He's now at Heerenveen. He was never going to break into Manchester City first team, and I think this is a great move for him. If you actually type his name into Twitter, and you'll see all the Hertha Berlin fans tweeting about him already because they're impressed with him. I know he scored in one of our pre-season friendlies, I think it was last week, and they're really impressed with the amount of pace he has, because that's what he is. He's a very fast, tricky winger. He scores goals. He's done it for Netherlands under-19s. He was called up to under-21s recently, even though he doesn't get any games for Manchester City's highly rated in the Netherlands with the youth coaches, and Hertha a place where he can finally show himself at top level football, and I think it's going to be a good, interesting player to keep an eye on next season.
Another one is Taith Chong. He hasn't made a move this summer, but could he be in for a really exciting season as well?
In a word, no, but only because he has Jose Mourinho as his manager. Manchester United fans are getting very excited because he's part of the first team training in America, and he's been part of the pre-season friendlies. He really impressed in one he set up, an equalising goal. A lot of the fans are raving about him, but then after the game, Jose Mourinho basically said he's not strong enough for the first team at the moment. He'll play in the academy next season, and he might get some cup game action, but until he basically becomes stronger and more physical, then he ain't going to get into the Premier League side. So either hopefully a loan move away would be the ideal situation, but whether Manchester United will allow that, we'll wait and see. But until somebody that is more inclined to give youngsters a chance comes in at that club, then I don't think he's going to really get a shot, which is a shame because he's a hugely talented player. Manchester United fans want to see him in the 11. They have such a history of blooding their own youth under Sir Alex Ferguson, but under Mourinho it's all about, you see what he did to Memphis Depay and some of the players that come through, Martial. It's very defensive work. I don't think Chong has that defensive mentality that Mourinho loves, and I can't see him breaking into the first team this year until he moves away.
It's interesting how Chung will be staying with the youth team at Manchester United. Why is it there's almost a bit of apprehension for getting a loan move? And this isn't the only player that this has been the case with. When I spoke to Dacian Redan, he sort of said that, this season I'm going to be with the academy for another season. Why don't these players look for a loan move instead? Isn't that more beneficial, or is staying with the youth team better for their development?
I don't think they have an awful lot of say. I think the main negotiations are done by agents and the clubs, and the player hears about potential interest. I think in the Premier League it's not very transparent in terms of other leagues. In terms of potential loan moves coming about, you hear more from the Dutch league, for example, with loans between domestic clubs and different divisions, and Germany and Spain. You don't necessarily hear about that, especially for younger players in the Premier League. So I think that a lot of young players don't really have as much as to say as they would like, because I think the power lies with their agent and the manager of the club in terms of whether they go on loan or not.
I think it's interesting though, because if you look at other Premier League clubs, they all have, say Chelsea or Manchester City, they've got these feeder clubs that they send their youth talents to. I'm pretty sure Manchester United used to have one in Belgium. I don't know if it was Antwerp. He used to send all the youth talents to. I think they don't really have one right now. I think it's a lot of youngsters, maybe they don't want to take the risk. I think Chong knows that maybe the Premier League under 23s, if he continues it there, he might get a chance. But if he gets sent on loan to an English Championship side and he isn't physically ready, then that could maybe damage his career at Manchester United. If you look at Rodney Congolo, last season he didn't stay with Manchester City, he went to Doncaster Rovers. And if you actually look at what Doncaster Rovers fans thought of Congolo, they didn't think he was very good. And then he goes back to Manchester City and he's instantly sold. I think it's about taking a risk. I think Chong needs to realise that he's not going to get closer to the national team or to his potential if he's just going to stay in the under-23 league. He needs to be braver and ask and plead with Manchester United's bosses to let him go if they're not going to use him. And at the main point, just not move to these clubs at such a young age, because there's so much evidence that it just doesn't work. Daniel Malen, who signed for Arsenal, he's now back at PSV, and he's going to be part of the first team this season. If he was still at Arsenal, would he still be in under-23s? Probably. So they need to be smarter and realise that these moves aren't probably the best for their career.
Well, Michael and James, thank you for this week.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're more than welcome.
Yep, I think first podcast after World Cup, I think we can all say that it was a good World Cup, but let's hope it's the last one. I thought everyone's there for the foreseeable future, because a World Cup without Oranje is just not worth watching.